Your life follows the direction of your thoughts, not your intentions, not your wishes, your thoughts. Most people think every day, but very few ever question how they think. That is where growth stops. Critical thinking is the skill that separates reaction from control, confusion from clarity, and emotion from understanding. This book will help you recognize your thought patterns, break mental traps, and build a mind that works for you instead of against you. Stay with this journey and subscribe, because mastering your thinking is the first step toward mastering yourself. Chapter 1. The Hidden Architecture of Thought. Every action begins as a thought. Before words are spoken, before decisions are made, before habits are formed, a thought quietly appears. Most people never notice this moment. They live inside their thoughts without ever stepping back to see how those thoughts are built. Critical thinking begins with awareness. Not awareness of the world, but awareness of the mind itself. Your mind is not random. It follows patterns. These patterns were shaped over time by experience, emotion, fear, reward, and repetition. They operate silently, guiding how you interpret reality, how you react to challenges, and how you define yourself. The problem is not that people think. The problem is that most people let their thinking run on autopilot. When thinking is automatic, it becomes reactive. When it is reactive, it becomes predictable. And when it is predictable, it limits growth. Critical thinking is the skill that interrupts this cycle. It allows you to step outside your mental habits and observe them without being controlled by them. The first step toward mastery is understanding that thoughts are not facts. They are interpretations. They are mental responses to stimuli, filtered through past experience. Yet most people treat their thoughts as truth. They believe every assumption. They trust every conclusion. They identify with every inner voice. This is where confusion begins. The mind constantly categorizes information, safe or unsafe, right or wrong, possible or impossible, success or failure. These categories form instantly, often without logic. They are based on emotion first, reasoning second. A single negative experience can shape years of thinking. A single moment of embarrassment can create lifelong self-doubt. A single success can create unrealistic confidence. These impressions solidify into thought patterns, and thought patterns become identity. Critical thinking requires you to separate yourself from these patterns. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of them. Once this separation begins, clarity follows. Thoughts are influenced by emotion more than logic. Fear narrows thinking. Anger distorts judgment. Excitement exaggerates outcomes. Comfort discourages questioning. Most decisions people regret were made under emotional influence rather than conscious evaluation. Critical thinking does not eliminate emotion. It places emotion in its proper position. It allows emotion to inform, not control. To think critically, you must slow down your mind. Speed is the enemy of clarity. Fast thinking feels efficient, but it is often shallow. Slow thinking feels uncomfortable, but it reveals depth. The mind resists slowing down because it prefers certainty. Even false certainty feels safer than honest uncertainty. Critical thinking accepts uncertainty as a tool. It does not rush to conclusions. It allows space for reflection. This space is where growth happens. Your mind constantly seeks patterns because patterns reduce effort. Once a belief is formed, the mind looks for evidence to confirm it. It ignores information that contradicts it. This is not intelligence. This is convenience. Critical thinking challenges convenience. Convenience. It forces the mind to confront opposing ideas. It questions familiar beliefs. It examines assumptions instead of defending them. This process is uncomfortable. Growth always is. Mental comfort creates stagnation. Mental friction creates insight. Your thought patterns influence how you see yourself. If your thinking is narrow, your identity becomes limited. If your thinking is rigid, your growth becomes restricted. Many people believe they lack confidence, intelligence, or ability. In reality, they are trapped inside unexamined thought loops. These loops repeat silently. I am not good enough. This is too hard. People like me don't succeed. It's too late to change. These are not truths. They are patterns. Critical thinking exposes these patterns to light, and what is exposed can be changed. The brain is designed to protect you, not to help you grow. It prioritizes survival over expansion. This is why it prefers familiar thinking, even if that thinking is limiting. Critical thinking trains the mind to tolerate discomfort, to sit with complexity, to resist emotional shortcuts. This training creates mental strength. A strong mind does not panic when challenged. It analyzes, it evaluates, it adapts. Critical thinking is not about being skeptical of everything. It is about being intentional with belief. You choose what deserves your trust. You choose which ideas shape your decisions. You choose which thoughts deserve your attention. This choice is power. Most people surrender this power unconsciously. They absorb opinions from society, family, media, and peers. They repeat beliefs they never examined. They defend ideas they never chose. Critical thinking returns ownership of the mind to you. It teaches you to ask not whether a thought feels true, but whether it is useful, accurate, and grounded. This shift changes everything. Your perception of problems changes. Challenges become data, not threats. Failure becomes feedback, not identity. Mistakes become information, not shame. This perspective builds resilience. A critically thinking mind does not collapse under pressure. It adjusts. It recalibrates. It learns. Mental clarity creates emotional stability. When thoughts are organized, emotions settle. When assumptions are challenged, anxiety reduces. Confusion often comes from believing conflicting thoughts without realizing it. Critical thinking brings coherence. Your internal dialogue becomes cleaner, less noise, more direction. This clarity does not make life easy. It makes it manageable. Critical thinking also improves self-awareness. You begin to notice how your mood affects your judgment, how fatigue influences your patience, how fear disguises itself as logic. This awareness creates choice. Instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of assuming, you investigate. Instead of judging, you observe. These shifts may seem small, but they compound over time. Personal improvement is not about dramatic transformation. It is about consistent refinement of thought. Every improved decision begins with improved thinking. As this chapter closes, understand this clearly. You cannot change your life without changing how you think about it, and you cannot change how you think without first understanding the architecture of your thoughts. This is the foundation. Everything that follows in this book builds on this awareness. From here, you will learn how thoughts form, how they distort reality, and how to reshape them deliberately, not to become perfect, but to become clear, and clarity is the beginning of mastery. Chapter 2. How Thought Patterns Are Formed. No thought appears out of nowhere. Every thought has a history. Long before you became aware of how you think, your mind was already learning patterns. It learned from repetition, from reward, from fear, from emotional moments that left marks. These marks slowly shaped the way your mind responds to the world. A thought pattern is simply a familiar route your mind takes. It chooses this route because it feels efficient, not because it is accurate. The brain loves efficiency. It saves energy by repeating what it already knows. The more a thought is repeated, the stronger the neural pathway becomes, and eventually that pathway becomes automatic. This is how habits of thinking are born. At first, a thought is a reaction. Then it becomes a preference. Then it becomes a belief. Finally, it becomes identity. Most people never notice this transition. They wake up one day believing something about themselves without remembering when that belief was installed. Thought patterns are often formed during emotional intensity. The mind remembers emotions more strongly than logic. A moment of failure creates caution. A moment of praise creates expectation. A moment of rejection creates self-doubt. A moment of success creates confidence. These moments teach the brain what to expect, and expectation shapes perception. Once expectation is formed, The mind starts filtering reality to match it. If you expect rejection, you notice rejection more easily. If you expect failure, you interpret difficulty as proof. If you expect success, you see opportunity where others see risk. The world does not change. Your interpretation does. This is why two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different conclusions. Their thought patterns are different. Family plays a powerful role in shaping early thought patterns. What you heard repeatedly became mental background noise, not because it was true, but because it was familiar. Messages about money, messages about success, messages about intelligence, messages about what is possible and what is not. These ideas were absorbed before you had the ability to evaluate them. They became defaults. Society reinforces these defaults. Culture rewards certain ways of thinking and discourages others. Over time, the pressure to fit in shapes how freely you think. Critical thinking begins when you realize that many of your thoughts were inherited, not chosen. Another major force behind thought patterns is emotional protection. The brain learns to avoid pain. If trying something new once led to embarrassment, the mind remembers that pain. Next time, it creates hesitation. This hesitation feels like logic. It sounds like reason, but it is actually memory defending itself. The mind often disguises fear as logic. It says, "This is not practical," when it really means, "This feels unsafe." It says, "This won't work," when it really means, "I don't want to feel disappointment again." Critical thinking unmasks these disguises. Thought patterns are also shaped by repetition of internal dialogue. What you tell yourself daily becomes mental law. The mind does not argue with repetition. It accepts it. If you repeat limitation, your mind builds limitation. If you repeat growth, your mind builds possibility. This is not motivation. It is conditioning. Most people condition their mind unconsciously. Critical thinkers condition it deliberately. Another factor shaping thought patterns is cognitive shortcuts. The brain uses shortcuts to make quick judgments. These shortcuts are useful for survival, but dangerous for understanding. They simplify complex reality into easy labels, good or bad, us or them. These shortcuts reduce thinking effort, but increase error. Once a shortcut is formed, the mind applies it broadly. This is how bias is created. Bias is not hatred. It is lazy thinking repeated long enough to feel justified. Critical thinking requires recognizing these shortcuts without defending them. Most people defend their biases because they confuse bias with identity. A critical thinker separates belief from self. You can examine a belief without feeling attacked. You can revise a thought without losing yourself. This flexibility is strength. Thought patterns also form through reward systems. When a certain way of thinking leads to approval, the brain remembers it. Agreeing gets rewarded. Questioning gets punished. Silence gets safety. Over time, the mind learns which thoughts are allowed and which are dangerous. Critical thinking challenges these silent rules. It asks whether safety has become a prison. Your environment constantly reinforces certain thinking habits. Fast opinions, emotional reactions, surface-level conclusions. Depth is rarely rewarded. Speed sacrifices accuracy. Critical thinkers slow the process intentionally. They are willing to feel uncertain long enough to understand clearly. This willingness separates growth from stagnation. Thought patterns are not permanent. They feel permanent because they are familiar. The brain resists change, not because change is wrong, but because change is unknown. Critical thinking introduces the unknown gently. It replaces rigid certainty with flexible understanding. When you examine your thought patterns, you begin to see how often your mind predicts outcome without sufficient evidence. Prediction is comforting. Understanding is demanding. Critical thinkers choose understanding. They notice how often their mind jumps to conclusions. They notice emotional reactions disguised as logic. They notice assumptions built on limited data. This noticing creates distance. Distance creates control. Once you see how a thought pattern forms, it loses its authority over you. You can still have the thought, but it no longer controls your action automatically. This is freedom. The goal of critical thinking is not to eliminate thought patterns. It is to make them visible. What is visible can be adjusted. What is invisible controls silently. As you continue through this book, you will learn how to interrupt harmful patterns, how to refine useful ones, and how to build a thinking system that supports growth instead of limitation. But that work begins here. With understanding how patterns are formed, awareness is the doorway. Without it, improvement remains accidental. With it, improvement becomes intentional. This chapter marks the moment you stop being shaped by unconscious thinking and start shaping your mind deliberately. From here, the work deepens. Chapter 3: Mental Distortions and Invisible Thinking Traps. The mind does not lie on purpose. It distorts reality to protect itself. Most people believe their thinking is rational. In truth, much of it is shaped by invisible distortions. These distortions bend perception quietly until what feels logical is no longer accurate. Mental distortions are shortcuts taken too far. They simplify reality at the cost of truth. They feel natural because they are familiar. Once a distortion forms, it becomes a lens. And through that lens, everything looks the same. One common distortion is overgeneralization. A single experience becomes a universal rule. One failure becomes proof of incompetence. One rejection becomes evidence of unworthiness. The mind prefers certainty, even if that certainty is false. Another distortion is emotional reasoning. If something feels bad, the mind assumes it is bad. If something feels risky, the mind assumes it is dangerous. Emotion becomes evidence. Feeling replaces fact. Critical thinking breaks this illusion. It separates feeling from reality. Feelings are signals, not conclusions. Another powerful trap is confirmation bias. Once the mind believes something, it searches for proof. It ignores contradiction. It filters information selectively. This creates a closed loop. The belief feeds itself, and the thinker feels validated without being accurate. Many people live inside these loops for decades. They believe they are open-minded while rejecting anything that challenges them. Critical thinkers actively seek friction. They expose beliefs to opposing views to test their strength. Avoiding contradiction weakens thinking. Facing it strengthens clarity. Another distortion is catastrophizing. The mind exaggerates outcomes. Small problems become disasters. Uncertainty becomes threat. This distortion feeds anxiety. It drains mental energy. It convinces the mind that danger is everywhere. But most feared outcomes never happen. And even when they do, they are rarely as severe as imagined. The mind confuses possibility with probability. Critical thinking corrects this imbalance. It grounds imagination in evidence. Another invisible trap is black and white thinking. The mind divides reality into extremes: success or failure, good or bad, right or wrong. But reality exists in nuance. Growth happens in the middle. Extreme thinking limits options. It forces rigid choices. It creates unnecessary pressure. Flexible thinking expands possibility. Another distortion is personalization. The mind assumes responsibility for events outside its control. Someone is quiet, and the mind assumes fault. Something goes wrong, and the mind assumes blame. This distortion creates unnecessary guilt. It ties self-worth to randomness. Critical thinking restores proportion. It asks what is truly within control and what is not. The mind also distorts through labeling. One mistake becomes an identity. One weakness becomes a permanent trait. Labels simplify complexity, but they imprison growth. A critical thinker rejects fixed identity. They see behavior, not essence. Behavior can change. Essence is not defined by a moment. Another trap is mental filtering. The mind focuses on negatives while ignoring positives. 10 successes disappear. One mistake dominates attention. This imbalance skews self-perception. It feeds dissatisfaction. It erodes confidence quietly. Critical thinking restores balance. It views the full picture. Distortions persist because they feel protective. They promise safety. They promise certainty. But safety without truth becomes limitation. Most distortions were formed to avoid pain, but over time, they create more pain than they prevent. The mind holds on to distortions because familiarity feels safe. Critical thinking requires courage. The courage to question internal narratives. The courage to feel discomfort temporarily for long-term clarity. When distortions are exposed, they lose power. The mind becomes quieter, less reactive, more intentional. You begin to respond to reality instead of fear-based interpretation. This does not make life perfect. It makes it accurate. Accuracy builds confidence. Confidence builds resilience. As distortions fade, mental space opens. Options appear. Flexibility increases. You stop assuming. You start observing. This shift changes how you experience setbacks. Mistakes become data. Feedback becomes information. Challenges become neutral events instead of personal attacks. Mental clarity improves emotional stability. You feel less overwhelmed because fewer thoughts hijack your emotions. Critical thinking is not about harsh self-judgment. It is about honest observation. You notice distortions without shame, without denial, and in that noticing, freedom begins. This chapter marks a turning point. From here forward, you will not believe every thought automatically. You will pause, you will observe, you will evaluate, and that pause creates power. The next chapters will show you how to restructure thinking deliberately, how to replace distortions with clarity, and how to build a mental system that supports growth instead of sabotage. But it begins here, with seeing the traps that once felt invisible. Chapter 4. Slowing the mind to think clearly. Speed feels powerful, but speed is often the enemy of clarity. Most mistakes are not made because people are incapable. They are made because people think too fast. The modern mind is trained for reaction, instant opinions, instant judgments, instant conclusions. This constant speed creates the illusion of intelligence, but intelligence is not speed. Intelligence is precision. Critical thinking begins the moment you slow down. When the mind slows, details emerge. When details emerge, understanding deepens. When understanding deepens, control returns. A fast mind jumps. A slow mind sees. Most people confuse hesitation with weakness. In reality, hesitation is often wisdom forming. The mind resists slowing because speed feels safe. Slowing down forces the mind to face complexity. Speed avoids discomfort. Speed avoids uncertainty. But complexity is where truth lives. And complexity feels uncomfortable. The first benefit of slowing the mind is awareness. You begin to notice how quickly conclusions form, how assumptions appear before evidence, how emotions rush ahead of reasoning. This awareness creates a pause, and in that pause, choice appears. Without the pause, reaction rules. With the pause, intention leads. Slowing the mind does not mean overthinking. It means deliberate thinking. Overthinking is uncontrolled speed. A slowed mind observes thoughts instead of chasing them. Critical thinking is controlled pace. It watches patterns unfold. It notices emotional influence. You begin to see how stress accelerates thinking, how fear compresses options, how excitement blinds judgment. These observations change behavior naturally. When the mind slows, emotional intensity decreases. Emotions still exist, but they no longer dominate. Calm creates space. Space creates clarity. They feel pressured to respond, decide, and act immediately. Many people live in mental urgency. Urgency narrows perception. It convinces the mind that delay equals danger. But most situations do not require immediate response. They require thoughtful response. Critical thinkers recognize false urgency. They resist the pressure to decide before understanding. This resistance feels uncomfortable at first, but with practice, it becomes strength. A slowed mind improves accuracy. It reduces errors. It prevents regret. You begin to think in layers instead of impulses. Layer 1 is reaction. Layer 2 is emotion. Layer 3 is assumption. Layer 4 is evidence. Most people stop at layer 1. Critical thinkers reach layer 4. Slowing the mind allows you to access deeper layers. Another advantage of slowing down is pattern recognition. When thinking is rushed, patterns are missed. When thinking is deliberate, connections appear. You begin to see recurring themes in your decisions, repeated mistakes, repeated emotional triggers, repeated beliefs. This recognition is powerful. Patterns reveal leverage points for change. Without slowing down, life feels chaotic. With slowing down, life feels structured. It means coherence. Structure does not mean rigidity. A coherent mind aligns thought, emotion, and action. Slowing the mind also strengthens self-trust. When you make decisions calmly, you trust them more deeply. You are less haunted by doubt, less burdened by second-guessing. Doubt thrives in rushed decisions. Confidence grows from deliberate choice. Critical thinkers accept that clarity takes time. They are not afraid of silence. They are not afraid of waiting. Many insights are missed because the mind never pauses long enough to receive them. Silence allows insight to surface. Slowing the mind also improves listening. You stop preparing responses while others speak. You begin to absorb meaning instead of words. This improves communication. It improves relationships. It improves understanding. People feel respected when you are present. Presence requires mental stillness. A slowed mind creates presence. Another effect of slowing the mind is emotional resilience. When the mind is not racing, stress loses its grip. You respond to challenges with perspective instead of panic. Perspective widens options. Panic narrows them. Critical thinking favors perspective. Slowing the mind helps separate signal from noise. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every emotion requires action. Discernment improves when pace decreases. You begin to choose thoughts intentionally. This choice strengthens mental discipline. Discipline is not restriction, it is direction. A directed mind moves forward consistently. Many people believe productivity requires speed. In reality, productivity requires clarity. Clear thinking prevents wasted effort. It prevents chasing wrong goals. It prevents solving the wrong problems. Slowing the mind sharpens focus. Focus multiplies effectiveness. Critical thinkers do fewer things better. Slowing down also reveals hidden assumptions. Assumptions often hide beneath speed. When you slow, they surface. Once visible, assumptions can be tested. Tested assumptions either strengthen or dissolve. Both outcomes improve thinking. A slowed mind also reduces cognitive overload. The brain processes information more efficiently when not overwhelmed. Overload creates confusion. Clarity requires space. Slowing the mind also strengthens emotional intelligence. Space is created by slowing down. You become aware of how emotions influence decisions. You notice when fear whispers caution disguised as logic. You notice when desire exaggerates outcomes. This awareness improves judgment. Critical thinkers develop patience with complexity. They no longer need immediate answers. They tolerate uncertainty calmly. Uncertainty becomes a place of exploration instead of fear. This tolerance separates mature thinkers from reactive ones. Slowing the mind also builds internal alignment. Thoughts become organized. Intentions become clear. Actions become consistent. Consistency builds credibility, both internally and externally. You begin to feel grounded, less scattered, less conflicted. Grounded thinking creates stable identity. When the mind slows, self-talk improves. Internal dialogue becomes kinder, more accurate, less extreme. This reduces mental fatigue. Critical thinking is not about thinking more. It is about thinking better. Better thinking requires pace control. Slowing the mind is a skill. It improves with practice. Each pause strengthens awareness. Each moment of reflection sharpens judgment. This chapter represents a shift. From urgency to intention, you will learn how to use this slower pace as you continue this journey from reaction to evaluation, to restructure beliefs, make stronger decisions, and design thought system. But that progress depends on this foundation. Clarity begins where speed ends. That support long-term improvement. Chapter 5. Breaking Old Beliefs and Rebuilding Thought Systems. Every belief once started as a thought, and every thought was once questioned or accepted. Most people never remember when they accepted their beliefs. They only remember defending them. Beliefs feel permanent because they are repeated, not because they are true. The mind clings to beliefs because beliefs create identity, and identity creates emotional safety. To question a belief feels like questioning yourself. That is why change feels threatening. But growth has never been comfortable. Old beliefs shape how you interpret everything. They decide what you try, what you avoid, what you tolerate, what you chase. A belief does not need to be logical to be powerful. It only needs to be familiar. Many limiting beliefs were formed during moments of emotional vulnerability, moments when the mind was open but unprotected. A failure whispered a story. A comparison planted a conclusion. A rejection wrote a rule, and the mind accepted it quietly. Over time, these beliefs hardened. They stopped feeling like thoughts. They started feeling like facts. Critical thinking disrupts this illusion. A belief is not reality. It is a lens, and lenses can be replaced. The danger of unexamined beliefs is that they operate silently. They influence decisions without asking permission. You may believe effort does not pay off. You may believe people cannot be trusted. You may believe change is risky. Each belief limits behavior. Breaking old beliefs does not mean rejecting everything. It means testing what you carry. A critical thinker asks whether a belief still serves growth, not whether it feels comfortable. Comfort preserves the past. Clarity builds the future. The first step in breaking a belief is noticing its emotional charge. Beliefs with strong emotional reactions are often the least examined. If a belief feels untouchable, it probably needs inspection. The mind protects beliefs that once protected you, even if they no longer do. What once kept you safe may now keep you small. Breaking beliefs requires separating truth from familiarity. Familiarity feels like truth because repetition builds confidence. But confidence is not accuracy. Critical thinking introduces doubt in a healthy way, not destructive doubt, but constructive doubt. Doubt that opens space. Doubt that invites investigation. When you examine a belief, you look at its origin. You ask where it came from. You notice when it appeared. Most beliefs were formed without evidence. They were formed through emotion, imitation, or assumption. Seeing this weakens their grip. Another powerful step is observing behavior shaped by belief. Beliefs leave footprints. They shape choices. They shape habits. They shape reactions. When a belief consistently leads to limitation, it deserves reevaluation. A belief that blocks growth is not wisdom. It is residue. Critical thinkers treat beliefs as tools, not identities. A tool is used when useful and replaced when broken. Identity resists replacement. This shift in perspective creates freedom. Rebuilding thought systems begins with intentional replacement. You do not remove a belief and leave a void. The mind dislikes emptiness. It fills gaps quickly. A weak belief must be replaced with a more accurate one. Accuracy matters more than positivity. Blind optimism collapses under pressure. Accurate thinking adapts. A new belief should be grounded in evidence, experience, and realistic possibility, not fantasy, not denial. Critical thinkers design beliefs that support action. A useful belief expands options. It encourages effort. It allows flexibility. Rebuilding thought systems requires consistency. A single insight does not change a belief. Repetition does. The mind rewires through exposure. Each time you choose a new interpretation, you weaken the old pattern. This process feels uncomfortable at first. The old belief resists replacement. Resistance is not failure. It is confirmation of change. The mind resists unfamiliar thinking because it has not yet learned to trust it. Trust builds through repetition. As new beliefs settle, behavior changes naturally. You attempt what you once avoided. You respond differently to setbacks. You interpret challenges with more nuance. This creates momentum. Momentum reinforces belief. This loop builds upward instead of inward. Rebuilding thought systems also requires patience. Beliefs formed over years do not dissolve overnight. Critical thinking is a practice, not a switch. Each reflection strengthens awareness. Each correction improves alignment. Over time, the mind becomes flexible. It stops clinging. It starts adapting. Adaptability is intelligence in motion. Rigid minds break under pressure. Flexible minds adjust. Critical thinkers are not attached to being right. They are attached to understanding. Understanding evolves. As you rebuild your thought system, you notice a shift in emotional weight. Fear decreases. Curiosity increases. Curiosity replaces defensiveness. This emotional shift signals growth. You begin to see beliefs as temporary frameworks, not permanent truths. This mindset opens doors. You stop fearing change, because change no longer threatens identity. You are no longer your beliefs. You are the one who chooses them. That distinction changes everything. As this chapter settles, recognize what is happening. You are no longer dismantling thoughts randomly. You are learning to design your mental structure intentionally. The next chapters will show you how to apply this rebuilt thinking to decisions, to problem solving, to long-term personal improvement. But this foundation matters. You cannot build clarity on inherited assumptions. You cannot grow while defending outdated beliefs. Breaking old beliefs is not losing yourself. It is finally meeting who you can become. Chapter 6. Thinking before deciding. Every decision is the result of a thinking process. Even the smallest choice carries a mental pattern behind it. Most people believe their decisions are logical. In reality, many decisions are emotional reactions that the mind explains afterward. This is where regret begins. Critical thinking brings awareness to the moment before a decision is made. That moment determines everything that follows. A reactive decision feels fast. It feels relieving. It removes discomfort immediately. But relief is not resolution. Critical thinkers learn to pause between impulse and action. That pause is where clarity enters. Decisions made in haste will often serve emotion, not outcome. Fear chooses safety. Ego chooses validation. Comfort chooses familiarity. None of these guarantee growth. Thinking before deciding means separating emotion from evaluation. Not suppressing emotion, but understanding its influence. Emotion provides information. It should not provide instruction. When you slow down, you begin to see hidden motivations. Why do I want this choice now? Why does this option feel urgent? Why does the alternative feel uncomfortable? These insights reveal emotional drivers. Critical thinkers examine options without attachment. They do not rush to defend a choice, before understanding it. This detachment improves accuracy. Decision quality depends on perspective. A narrow perspective creates fragile choices. A wide perspective creates resilient ones. Critical thinking expands perspective. You begin to see long-term consequences, not just short-term relief. Many poor decisions feel good now and cost later. Many good decisions feel uncomfortable now and reward later. Critical thinkers accept delayed comfort in exchange for lasting improvement. They understand that discipline is choosing what matters most over what feels easiest. Another key to clear decision-making is recognizing assumptions. Every decision rests on assumptions about outcomes, about risk, about capability, Unexamined assumptions distort judgment. Critical thinkers surface assumptions deliberately. They notice what they are taking for granted. Once visible, assumptions can be tested. Testing assumptions reduces error. Another powerful element is probability. The mind often exaggerates unlikely outcomes. Fear magnifies risk. Critical thinking grounds imagination in realistic likelihood. This balance prevents paralysis. Decisions also improve when thinking shifts from outcome obsession, waar that you ain't a mission that want you but instead your is moeder trouwens constantly sheben the comforts to process awareness. You cannot control outcomes. You can control quality of thinking. Good thinking increases favorable outcomes over time. Critical thinkers focus on alignment. Does this decision align with values? Does it align with long-term direction? Does it support growth or avoidance? Alignment simplifies complexity. When a decision aligns internally, confidence follows naturally. Confidence is not certainty. It is coherence. Another decision trap is overthinking. Overthinking feels like caution, but it often masks fear. Critical thinking is not endless analysis. It is structured evaluation. There is a point where more thinking no longer adds value. Critical thinkers recognize this threshold. They decide when clarity is sufficient. This balance prevents stagnation. Another important element is learning from past decisions without being controlled by them. Regret becomes wisdom when it informs future thinking. Critical thinkers extract lessons. Instead of replaying mistakes emotionally, they separate learning from self-judgment. This separation builds resilience. Decision-making also improves when you recognize decision fatigue. A tired mind seeks shortcuts. It chooses convenience. Critical thinkers protect mental energy. They avoid unnecessary decisions. They simplify routines. This preserves clarity for important choices. Good decisions require mental space. Thinking before deciding also means recognizing influence. Social pressure, expectations, and comparison distort thinking. Critical thinkers notice external pressure without surrendering to it. They choose deliberately instead of reacting socially. This autonomy strengthens self-trust. Self-trust grows when decisions are intentional. Each thoughtful decision reinforces confidence. Confidence built this way is stable. It does not depend on approval. As your thinking improves, decision-making becomes calmer, less second-guessing, less regret, more consistency. Consistency builds momentum. Momentum compounds improvement. Critical thinking does not guarantee perfect decisions. It guarantees conscious ones. Conscious decisions create learning instead of confusion. As this chapter settles, understand that mastery is not speed. It is clarity before action. In the next chapter, you will learn how to apply this clarity to problem-solving and complex situation without mental overload, because strong thinking is not only about choices, it is about direction. Chapter 7: Thinking Clearly in Complex Situation. Complex situations do not break people. Unclear thinking does. Most problems feel overwhelming because the mind tries to solve everything at once. When everything feels urgent, nothing becomes clear. Critical thinking teaches you how to hold complexity without collapsing under it. The first mistake people make in complex situation is emotional identification. They feel the problem instead of understanding it. Emotion floods the mind. Fear accelerates thought. Stress compresses options. The situation does not change. Perception does. Critical thinkers create distance, not emotional coldness, but mental space. Distance allows structure to appear. A complex problem is rarely one problem. It is a collection of smaller issues and stacked together. When the mind treats it as one mass, it feels unsolvable. Critical thinking separates layers. Once separated, complexity becomes manageable. The mind regains control when it shifts from reaction to analysis. Analysis does not mean cold logic. It means organized attention. Where attention goes, clarity follows. Another trap in complexity is urgency illusion. The mind believes everything must be solved now. This pressure is often false. Critical thinkers identify what truly requires immediate action and what can wait. This prioritization reduces overwhelm. Not all problems deserve equal energy. When everything is treated as critical, mental exhaustion follows. Clear thinking preserves energy for what matters most. Complex situations also trigger assumption overload. The mind fills gaps with guesses. Assumptions feel like facts when stress is high. Critical thinkers slow the narrative. They separate what is known from what is assumed. This separation changes decisions. Many problems shrink once assumptions are removed. Another challenge is conflicting information. Different signals, different opinions, different pressures. The mind seeks certainty. Even when certainty is unavailable, critical thinking accepts ambiguity temporarily. Temporary uncertainty prevents permanent mistakes. Clarity often emerges after confusion is tolerated instead of resisted. Complex situations demand patience. Patience is not passivity, it is strategic stillness. Stillness allows insight. Insight rarely arises in mental chaos. It arrives when the mind is calm enough to notice patterns. Patterns reveal leverage points. A leverage point is a small adjustment that creates a large effect. Critical thinkers search for leverage, not total control. Total control is impossible. Leverage is realistic. This mindset reduces frustration. Complex situations also test emotional discipline. The urge to react often feels justified, but reaction rarely improves complexity. Response does. Response is thoughtful. Reaction is impulsive. Critical thinking trains response. Another danger is tunnel vision. Under pressure, the mind narrows focus. It misses alternatives. It ignores nuance. Critical thinkers intentionally widen perspective. They step back mentally to see context. Context reveals meaning. Meaning guides decision. Complexity often hides opportunity, but opportunity is invisible. To a panicked mind, a calm mind sees possibility where others see threat. This calm is not natural. It is trained. Training comes from practice, in smaller moments. Each time you pause, each time you analyze, each time you resist panic, you strengthen this ability. Critical thinkers trust processed over immediate resolution. They know that clarity compounds. They also know that some problems resolve themselves once emotional pressure is removed. Not every problem requires action. Some require understanding. Understanding reshapes response. Another strength of critical thinking, in complexity, is adaptability. Rigid thinking breaks when conditions change. Flexible thinking adjusts. Critical thinkers update assumptions as new information appears. They are not loyal to old conclusions. They are loyal to accuracy. This loyalty prevents stagnation. Complex situations also reveal values. Pressure exposes priorities. Critical thinkers use this insight and to realign direction. They ask what truly matters beneath the chaos. This clarity simplifies choice. When values are clear, decisions become lighter. The situation may remain complex, but the mind does not. This internal simplicity creates external effectiveness. Over time, you begin to trust yourself. In complexity, confidence grows, not from control, but from clarity under pressure. You stop fearing difficult situations because you know you can think through them. This is mental resilience. As this chapter closes, recognize the shift happening. Complexity no longer feels like danger. It feels like information, and information, when handled with clarity, becomes power. In the next chapter, you will learn how to apply this clarity to long-term thinking, planning, and personal direction. Because mastery is not only how you think in moments of pressure, but how you design your future deliberately. Chapter 8. Designing long-term thinking. Most people think in moments, Critical thinkers think in trajectories. A moment asks for reaction. A trajectory asks for direction. Long-term thinking is the ability to step beyond immediate emotion and view life as a sequence of cause and effect. Without this skill, people stay busy but never move far. Short-term thinking feels productive. It creates motion, but motion without direction leads to exhaustion. Critical thinking introduces direction. Long-term thinkers do not live in the future. They build the future through present clarity. They understand that today's thinking becomes tomorrow's reality. Every habit is a delayed outcome. Every identity is accumulated thought. Long-term thinking begins with awareness of time perspective. Most people underestimate how powerful small daily decisions are. They overestimate what can change quickly and underestimate what compounds slowly. Critical thinkers reverse this illusion. They focus on consistency instead of intensity. Intensity burns fast. Consistency builds quietly. Long-term thinking is not dramatic. It is disciplined. It replaces emotional urgency with strategic patience. Patience is not waiting. It is choosing actions that align with future intention. Many people sabotage themselves because they think short-term comfort is harmless. Comfort today often charges interest tomorrow. Critical thinkers see this clearly. They ask whether a choice supports their long-term self or only satisfies the present emotion. This awareness reshapes priorities. Long-term thinking also requires mental projection. Projection is not fantasy. It is realistic imagination. You mentally follow a decision forward and observe where it leads. This practice reveals consequences before they arrive. Consequences are not punishments, they are outcomes. Critical thinkers respect outcomes instead of resenting them. They understand that the future is not random. It is patterned. Patterns repeat until thinking changes. Long-term thinkers break patterns intentionally. They notice cycles in behavior, relationships, at the work, and emotional response. Once noticed, cycles can be interrupted. Interruption creates possibility. Another element of long-term thinking is delayed gratification. The mind prefers immediate reward. Critical thinkers train themselves to value delayed results. This training strengthens self-control. Self-control is not denial. It is alignment. Aligned thinking reduces internal conflict. When choices match direction, discipline feels natural. Long-term thinkers also manage expectation wisely. They do not expect linear progress. They expect fluctuation. This expectation prevents discouragement. Progress is uneven. Growth includes pauses. Setbacks do not erase direction. Critical thinking normalizes this reality. When setbacks occur, long-term thinkers extract data instead of emotion. They adjust approach instead of abandoning vision. This adaptability sustains momentum. Long-term thinking also reshapes identity. You stop defining yourself by temporary states. A bad week does not become failure. A good moment does not become arrogance. Identity becomes anchored in direction, not performance. This stability protects motivation. Another pillar of long-term thinking is value clarity. Without values, planning becomes hollow. Values guide priorities. They filter decisions. Critical thinkers define what matters before designing action. This prevents chasing goals that lead nowhere meaningful. Long-term thinking also requires mental resilience. The future rarely unfolds as planned. Rigid plans break. Flexible thinking adapts. Critical thinkers plan principle more than exact outcomes. Principles survive change. This mindset reduces anxiety. You are prepared without being attached. Another trap in long-term thinking is perfectionism. Perfection delays action. It hides fear behind standards. Critical thinkers choose progress. They understand that imperfect action beats perfect intention. Long-term success is built through correction, not hesitation. Correction requires feedback. Critical thinkers seek feedback without emotional defense. They separate information from ego. This separation accelerates learning. Long-term thinking also strengthens focus. Focus is the ability to ignore distraction. Distraction will defaden. Without resentment. Resentment drains energy. Critical thinkers accept trade-offs calmly. They understand that every yes requires many no's. This acceptance prevents regret. Long-term thinkers also manage energy. Burnout destroys direction. They pace effort. They respect rest. Rest is not weakness. It is maintenance. Maintenance sustains clarity. Long-term thinking also improves emotional maturity. You stop reacting dramatically to temporary events. Perspective replaces panic. This emotional steadiness improves relationships. People trust those who are not controlled by the moment. Leadership emerges naturally from long-term thinking. Others feel safe around someone who sees beyond now. Another strength is decision consistency. Short-term thinkers change direction often. Long-term thinkers refine direction. Refinement creates depth. Depth outperforms novelty. Critical thinking also helps identify false goals. Not every desire deserves pursuit. Some goals are inherited, some are imposed. Long-term thinkers question motives. They ask whether a goal supports growth or only status. This clarity prevents empty success. Long-term thinking also creates internal peace. You stop rushing. You stop comparing timelines. Comparison distorts perception. Every path unfolds differently. Critical thinkers respect individuality. They trust their process. Trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety thrives in unclear direction. Direction dissolves anxiety. As long-term thinking strengthens, you begin to feel grounded, even when outcomes are uncertain. Uncertainty no longer threatens identity. You become comfortable, not knowing everything yet. This comfort is maturity. Long-term thinkers also recognize when to persist and when to pivot. Persistence without awareness becomes stubbornness. Pivoting without clarity becomes instability. Critical thinking balances both. This balance prevents wasted years. You invest time intentionally. Time is not spent, it is allocated. Critical thinkers treat time as a strategic resource. This respect changes behavior. Distractions lose power. Meaning gains priority. As this chapter settles, recognize the shift. You are no longer thinking only to survive today. You are thinking to design tomorrow. The next chapters will bring this thinking into integration and refinement. Because mastery is not only clarity, it is continuity. And continuity is built through long-term thinking. Chapter 9. Self-correction and the discipline of better thinking. Growth does not come from thinking once. It comes from refining thinking repeatedly. Most people believe insight alone changes life. In reality, insight fades if it is not reinforced by discipline. Critical thinking is not a moment of clarity. It is a system of correction. Self-correction is the ability to notice when your thinking drifts and gently bring it back to alignment. Without this skill, even intelligent people stagnate. The mind naturally returns to familiar patterns. This is not failure. It is habit. Critical thinkers do not fight this tendency. They work with it. They observe themselves thinking. Observation creates distance. Distance creates control. Self-correction begins with honesty, not harsh judgment, not self-attack. Honest observation. You notice when a decision was rushed. You notice when emotion influenced judgment. You notice when assumption replaced evidence. This noticing is powerful. Most people avoid noticing because it threatens ego. Critical thinkers separate ego from accuracy. Accuracy matters more than comfort. Self-correction requires humility, not humiliation. Humility is the willingness to admit adjustment is needed. This willingness accelerates growth. Rigid minds resist correction. Flexible minds evolve. Critical thinking favors evolution. Self-correction also requires consistency. One correction does not change a system. Repeated correction does. The mind rewires through exposure. Each time you revise a thought, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. This is mental training. Training is rarely dramatic. Rather, it is repetitive, and repetition creates mastery. Another key aspect of self-correction is feedback integration. Life constantly provides feedback. Outcomes reflect thinking. When results disappoint, critical thinkers ask what thinking led there. They do not blame fate. They do not blame identity. They analyze process. Process reveals leverage. Feedback is information, not judgment. Treating feedback emotionally blocks learning. Treating feedback analytically accelerates improvement. Self-correction also involves pattern review. Critical thinkers periodically review their decisions, their reactions, their habits. Not obsessively, intentionally. This review reveals trends. Trends reveal direction. Without review, mistakes repeat invisibly. With review, mistakes become teachers. Another element of disciplined thinking is emotional regulation. Unregulated emotion distorts correction. When emotion dominates, self-correction turns into self-criticism. Self-criticism weakens clarity. Critical thinkers regulate emotion before analyzing performance. Calm allows accuracy. Self-correction also requires time awareness. Not every mistake needs immediate fixing. Some need reflection. Rushing correction can create new errors. Patience sharpens adjustment. Critical thinkers allow insight to mature. They do not force conclusions. Another trap is overcorrection. Overcorrection swings thinking from one extreme to another. This creates instability. Effective correction is balanced. It refines, not replaces everything. Self-correction also improves intuition. When thinking becomes disciplined, intuition becomes accurate. Intuition is pattern recognition, built through experience and correction. Without correction, intuition is unreliable. With correction, it becomes powerful. Critical thinkers trust intuition only after training it. Self-correction also strengthens self-trust. When you know, you can adjust thinking. Fear of mistakes decreases. Mistakes become manageable. This reduces anxiety. Anxiety thrives when mistakes feel permanent. Correction restores confidence. Another important aspect is separating self-worth from thinking errors. A wrong thought does not define intelligence. It defines learning opportunity. Critical thinkers refuse to attach identity to temporary error. This emotional separation preserves motivation. Motivation fades when thinking becomes personal attack. Correction thrives when thinking remains neutral. Self-correction also shapes discipline. Discipline is not force, it is structure. Structure supports consistency. Critical thinkers build routines that support reflection. They protect mental space. Without space, correction disappears. Noise blocks insight. Quiet reveals patterns. Self-correction also benefits from written reflection. Externalizing thought clarifies internal confusion. Seeing, thinking on paper, exposes gaps. Gaps guide refinement. Another aspect is accepting imperfection. Perfectionism prevents correction because it resists exposure. Critical thinkers accept imperfection as part of development. Development requires iteration. Iteration requires error. Error requires courage. Courage strengthens discipline. Self-correction also improves decision speed over time. Initially, thinking slows. Later, accuracy increases. Accuracy eventually allows speed. This progression is natural. Rushing it backfires. Critical thinkers respect stages. Self-correction also reshapes relationships. Clear thinking improves communication. Misunderstandings decrease when assumptions are corrected early. This builds trust. Trust reinforces confidence. Confidence supports further growth. Self-correction also prevents stagnation. Many people plateau, not because they stop learning, but because they stop correcting. They defend old thinking, instead of refining it. Critical thinkers remain students, not of information, but of their own mind. This mindset keeps growth alive. As this chapter settles, recognize what has changed. You are no longer chasing perfect thinking. You are building reliable thinking. Reliable thinking adapts. It corrects itself. It improves quietly. It compounds over time. The next chapter will bring everything together. It will show how disciplined thinking translates into personal improvement that lasts. Because mastery is not a peak. It is a process. Chapter 10. Integrating critical thinking into everyday life. Critical thinking reaches its highest value when it stops being a concept and starts becoming a way of living. Understanding thought patterns is not enough. If awareness ends on the page, mastery begins when clarity follows you into ordinary moments, not during deep reflection only, but during conversations, decisions, conflicts, and quiet choices no one sees. Everyday life is where thinking is tested. Pressure reveals habits. Routine reveals discipline. Emotion reveals depth of understanding. Critical thinkers do not live perfectly. They live intentionally. Integration means your thinking does not change only when you try. It changes because it has become natural. The mind begins to pause without being forced. It begins to evaluate without being reminded. This is when thinking matures. Daily integration starts with awareness in motion. You notice how you interpret events. You notice internal reactions forming. You notice the story your mind begins to tell. And instead of believing it immediately, you observe it. Observation creates space. Space creates choice. This choice changes behavior quietly. Small moments matter most. How you respond to frustration. How you interpret silence. How you handle disagreement. How you react to delay. These moments reveal whether critical thinking has become part of you. Integration also requires emotional honesty. You do not pretend to be neutral. You acknowledge emotion without letting it dominate. Emotion becomes data, not direction. This balance strengthens maturity. Critical thinking in daily life also means accepting responsibility for interpretation. You stop blaming circumstances for internal reactions. You recognize that meaning is assigned, not delivered. This recognition restores control. Control does not mean force. It means understanding leverage. Leverage exists in perception. Change perception, and behavior follows naturally. Another sign of integration is reduction of mental noise. Fewer unnecessary thoughts. Less internal conflict. More coherence. Coherence is mental alignment. Alignment creates calm. Calm does not remove challenge. It removes confusion. Life becomes clearer, even when it remains difficult. Critical thinking also integrates into relationships. You listen more accurately. You assume less. You respond instead of react. Misunderstandings decrease because interpretation improves. Respect grows when communication becomes thoughtful. Another integration point is decision consistency. You stop swinging between extremes. You stop chasing certainty. You accept probability. This acceptance reduces anxiety. An anxious mind wants guarantees. A critical mind wants understanding. Understanding is enough. Daily integration also reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to improve. You become someone who thinks clearly. This identity is stable. It does not collapse under pressure. Pressure becomes feedback. Feedback becomes refinement. Refinement becomes progress. Critical thinking integrated into life also changes how you handle failure. Failure loses its emotional weight. It becomes information. Information sharpens strategy. This transformation protects motivation. Motivation survives when identity is not tied to outcome. Integration also improves patience. You stop rushing clarity. You allow understanding to mature. Maturity replaces urgency. Urgency fades when direction is clear. Clear direction stabilizes effort. Critical thinking also integrating into how you consume information. You become selective. Not everything deserves belief. Not everything deserves reaction. Discernment protects mental energy. Energy preserve is energy invested wisely. This investment compounds. Over time, you notice subtle shifts. Less regret, less confusion, less self-conflict, more clarity, more consistency, more confidence, not loud confidence, quiet confidence, confidence rooted in understanding. This confidence is resilient. It does not depend on praise. It does not collapse under criticism. It adapts. Integration also teaches acceptance. You accept that thinking will never be perfect. You accept that adjustment is ongoing. This acceptance prevents frustration. Progress becomes sustainable. Sustainable progress builds mastery. As critical thinking integrates fully, life becomes less reactive and more intentional. You respond to reality instead of assumptions. You design your days instead of drifting through them. This design is subtle. No dramatic transformation, no sudden perfection, just steady refinement. And refinement changes everything over time. Now, as this journey closes, understand what has truly changed. You have not learned what to think. You have learned how to think. That distinction matters, because thoughts will come and go, situations will change, challenges will return in new forms, but your ability to evaluate, to adjust, to clarify, will remain. This is mastery, not dominance over others, not control over outcomes, mastery over interpretation, mastery over reaction, mastery over direction. Carry this skill forward. Let it shape your decisions quietly. Let it refine your responses gently. Let it guide improvement patiently. You will not notice change overnight, but one day you will look back and realize your life feels clearer, not easier. Clearer, and clarity is the foundation of every meaningful improvement. This is not the end of thinking. It is the beginning of thinking well,